Chapter 2. Garden. 3 years earlier. The admission process at Ravencrest Psychiatric Hospital felt like a slow surrender of dignity. They took Alara's designer clothes, replacing them with shapeless hospital garments that made her feel like a ghost of herself. Her long dark hair, usually styled to perfection, hung loose around her face as they photographed her for intake. The flash caught her emerald eyes, making them look wild, desperate, exactly how she felt. "Mrs. Matthews," Dr. Anya said, reviewing her file. "Your husband tells us you've been experiencing episodes of dissociation and memory loss." Alara stared at her hands, remembering how they'd shaken that morning as David, her husband? Yes, that felt right. Had driven her here. There was something else, too. Something important about that morning, but it slipped away like smoke when she tried to grasp it. The first week passed in a haze of medications and therapy sessions. Ravencrest operated on a structured system of privileges. Patients could earn more freedom through compliance and progress. The Gothic architecture of the building loomed over everything, its stone walls holding secrets darker than Alara could imagine. It was during her first garden privilege that she saw him. The hospital gardens were beautiful, a stark contrast to the institutional interior. Victorian rose bushes lined cobblestone paths, and ancient oak trees provided patches of shade. Patients were allowed to walk the grounds during designated hours, always under the watchful eyes of orderlies stationed at strategic points. Alara sat on a stone bench, watching autumn leaves dance across the lawn, when he appeared like an apparition from another world. Even in standard-issue hospital clothes, he moved with a grace that seemed impossible in this place. His dark hair fell across his forehead in perfect disarray. And his face, God, his face could have been carved by Michelangelo himself. High cheekbones, strong jaw, and lips that seemed made for sin. But it was his eyes that caught her, deep brown with flecks of gold, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He sat beside her without asking permission, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're new here," he said, his voice rich and smooth like aged whiskey. "How can you tell?" A slight smile played at his lips. "You still look like you don't belong." His eyes roamed her face with an appreciation that made her skin tingle. "I'm Caspian." "Alara," she replied, trying to ignore how her pulse quickened when he said her name. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. He shifted slightly closer, and she caught his scent, something clean and masculine with undertones of sandalwood. "What brings you to our little slice of paradise, Alara?" She should have been cautious, should have remembered she was in a psychiatric hospital, that this beautiful man was a patient here. But something in his eyes made her want to trust him. "I don't remember," she admitted. "There are gaps. Things I should know but can't reach." He nodded thoughtfully. "They tell me I have schizophrenia," he said, his voice low and intimate. "That I see things that aren't real, believe things that can't be true." His fingers brushed against hers on the bench, sending electricity through her body. "But what if the things I see are more real than what everyone else believes?" Before she could respond, an orderly called out that garden time was ending. Caspian stood with fluid grace, then bent down close to her ear. "Meet me here tomorrow," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "I'll show you something that will change everything." That night, Alara dreamed of gold-flecked eyes and forbidden touches. She woke gasping, sheets twisted around her legs, body humming with an awareness she hadn't felt in years. Their garden meetings became a daily ritual. They were allowed an hour of outdoor time after lunch, weather permitting. Caspian would find ways to sit close to her, their conversations growing more intimate with each passing day. He told her about his life before Ravencrest. He'd been a gifted physics student at MIT before his episodes began. His understanding of quantum mechanics and consciousness had led him down paths that others couldn't comprehend. "Reality isn't what they tell us it is," he would say, his eyes blazing with conviction. The mind has powers they don't want us to understand. One overcast afternoon, 3 weeks after their first meeting, everything changed. They'd found a secluded spot behind a large oak tree, partially hidden from the orderly's view. Caspian was sitting close enough that their thighs touched, sending waves of heat through her body. "I want to show you something," he whispered, taking her hand. "But you have to trust me completely." She looked into his eyes, drowning in their depths. "I trust you." His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her bottom lip. "So beautiful," he murmured. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to see you every day and not be able to truly have you?" She should have pulled away, should have remembered. Someone. There was someone she should have been thinking about, wasn't there? But then his lips were on hers, and the world exploded into sensation. The kiss started gentle, questioning, but quickly became something else entirely. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting, claiming. His hands tangled in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss. She clutched at his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath the thin hospital shirt, as heat pooled low in her belly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "Let me show you who you really are," he whispered. "Let me show you what's possible." That was the beginning of their love affair, of her awakening, of everything that would follow. They found ways to be alone together, exploiting blind spots in the hospital's security, stealing moments in storage closets and abandoned therapy rooms. Each encounter was more intense than the last. One evening, in a disused art therapy room, he pressed her against the wall, his body hard and demanding against hers. His kisses were hungry, desperate, as if he could devour her whole. His hands roamed her body, igniting fires everywhere they touched, while she explored the sculpted planes of his chest and back. "We shouldn't," she gasped as his lips traveled down her neck. "We should," he countered, nipping at her pulse point. "You deserve to feel this alive, to feel everything." His hand slid under her hospital-issued shirt, palm hot against her stomach. "Let me make you feel alive." And she did. Oh, how she did. But it wasn't just physical. During their quiet moments, when they lay tangled together in some hidden corner, he would tell her about his discovery, about how he'd first realized he could project his consciousness into other bodies during what the doctors called his psychotic breaks, about how he'd kept it secret, knowing they would never understand. "The medications they give us," he said one afternoon, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "They're not to help us. They're to keep us from accessing our true potential, to keep us blind to what's really possible." "Show me," she whispered against his chest. "Show me everything." That was the day he began teaching her about body swapping. The day everything changed. The day she started down a path that would lead her to steal Dr. Anya's life and identity, to run from Caspian's growing possessiveness, to search for the truth about her past. But lying there in his arms, she couldn't have known any of that. All she knew was that for the first time since arriving at Ravencrest, maybe for the first time in years, she felt truly, completely alive.